June 6th, 1944. 3:47 in the morning. Somewhere over the Cottonton Peninsula, a C-47 transport shudders through flak-filled darkness. A paratrooper from the 82nd Airborne clutches a weapon that looks like it belongs in a mechanic's garage, not a war zone. Stamped steel, welded seams, no wood furniture, no elegant craftsmanship. Just 8 pounds of ugly metal that cost the United States Army $20.94. The green light flashes. He jumps into the black sky over Normandy, carrying the cheapest submachine gun America ever issued into combat. In 6 hours, that $20 weapon will prove itself in the hedgerows of France. The submachine gun that soldiers mocked is about to earn their respect. This is the M3 submachine gun, the weapon everyone called the grease gun because it looked exactly like one, built by a car headlight factory, designed to be fired and thrown away, held in contempt by the men who first received it. And yet, this ugly, disposable weapon would outserve every other submachine gun in American military history, from the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of Vietnam, to the deserts of Kuwait. 50 years of continuous service. The longest-serving submachine gun the United States ever fielded, the $20 gun that refused to die. 1941. America watches Europe burn and knows its turn is coming. The problem isn't whether America will fight. The problem is what soldiers will carry when they do. And in the submachine gun department, the United States has exactly one option: the Thompson, the Tommy gun. Beloved by gangsters and Marines alike, sleek, powerful, iconic, and absolutely impossible to manufacture in wartime quantities. The original Thompson cost $225 per weapon. That's over $3,000 in today's money. For a single submachine gun. The military simplified the design, cut corners, removed features. They got the price down to $45 per unit, still nearly $700 today. But cost wasn't the only problem. The Thompson required extensive machining, skilled workers, precision tolerances. The receiver alone demanded hours of careful milling on equipment that was already working around the clock producing rifles and machine guns. Every Thompson that rolled off the assembly line meant something else didn't get built. And the weight, nearly 11 pounds loaded. In the jungles of the Pacific, where every ounce mattered, soldiers cursed the Thompson's heft. Tank crews couldn't maneuver it inside their cramped vehicles. Paratroopers dreaded the extra mass during jumps. The Germans had already solved this problem. Their MP-40 was simpler, cheaper, and lighter than the Thompson, built with stamped steel components rather than precision-machined parts. The British Sten gun took the concept even further. A weapon so crude it could be manufactured in underground workshops by resistance fighters. Yet it worked. American military observers watched these weapons in action and understood the implications. The age of the craftsman-built submachine gun was ending. The future belonged to stamped steel and welded seams. The Army needed a replacement, something cheaper, lighter, faster to produce. Something that could arm the millions of soldiers shipping overseas. They needed a submachine gun that any factory could build, one that didn't require craftsmen, one that could be stamped out of sheet metal like automobile parts. They needed the impossible. Enter George Hyde. A German immigrant who came to America in 1927, Hyde had been designing submachine guns since the early 1930s. His earlier designs showed promise, but never quite worked out. The M2, his collaboration with General Motors' Inland Division, was actually adopted as a Thompson replacement in 1942. But production problems killed it before it ever reached soldiers. Hyde went back to his drafting table with a new mandate from Colonel René Studler, the Army's Chief of Small Arms Research. Build something so simple that any factory could produce it. Use stamped metal wherever possible. Eliminate every unnecessary part. Make it cheap. Make it fast. Make it work. Hyde delivered. The weapon he created looked like nothing American soldiers had ever seen. No polished wood stock, no precision machined receiver, no elegant lines whatsoever, just functional industrial efficiency. The M3 had only 52 parts. The Thompson had more than twice that. The receiver wasn't machined from a solid block of steel. It was two pieces of stamped sheet metal welded together to form a tube. The trigger mechanism used steel stampings and castings. The pistol grip was stamped. Even the sights were stamped. Only 3 components required precision machining: the barrel, the bolt face, and the threads holding the barrel in place. Everything else came off production lines that looked more like an automobile factory than a weapons plant, because that's exactly what they were. The guide lamp division of General Motors won the manufacturing contract. Their factory in Anderson, Indiana, normally made car headlight assemblies. They knew nothing about firearms. What they knew was stamping metal, welding seams, and running efficient production lines. Before the M3, Guide Lamp had just completed production of 1 million FP45 Liberator pistols, another George Hyde design. Single-shot pistols made of stamped steel, costing just $2.10 each, intended to be dropped behind enemy lines for resistance fighters. Hyde understood disposable weapons. Now he applied that philosophy to a submachine gun. The weapon received its official designation on December 12, 1942. United States submachine gun, caliber .45, M3. Cost per unit, $20.94. Compare that to the $45 Thompson. For the price of one Tommy gun, the Army could buy more than 2 M3s. And production was just getting started. Workers at Guide Lamp took one look at the new weapon and gave it the only name that made sense. It looked exactly like the grease guns mechanics used to lubricate car chassis. Same tubular body, same pistol grip, same industrial aesthetic. The grease gun was born. But here's what the production statistics don't tell you. When the first M3s reached training camps in early 1943, soldiers didn't celebrate the cost savings. They didn't marvel at the engineering efficiency. They laughed. After years of admiring the Thompson's sleek lines and precision craftsmanship, American soldiers were handed what looked like plumbing supplies welded together by a drunk machinist: the stamped receiver, the wire stock that folded but never stayed folded, the crude sights, the complete absence of any aesthetic consideration whatsoever. This was their weapon of war. One soldier described it as looking like something left over from the parts locker. Another said it had all the beauty of a drain pipe. Men who had dreamed of carrying Tommy guns into combat felt cheated. The M3 had to prove itself the hard way, not with elegance, not with reputation, but with the only thing that matters when bullets start flying. Performance, June 6, 1944, D-Day. Paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions carry M3s into combat for the first time, scattered across the Cotentin Peninsula, fighting in hedgerows and village streets. They discover something unexpected. The ugly gun works. The slower rate of fire, 450 rounds per minute, compared to the Thompson's 600 to 700, means better control. Less ammunition wasted, more accurate shooting. In the chaos of close combat, soldiers can actually place their shots where they want them. The ejection port cover, a simple sheet metal flap, keeps mud and debris out of the action. In the wet hedgerows of Normandy, where everything is perpetually soaked in rain and churned earth, the M3 keeps functioning while other weapons jam. And the weight. At just over 8 pounds loaded, nearly 3 pounds lighter than the Thompson, paratroopers appreciate every missing ounce. Tank crews can actually maneuver the compact weapon inside their vehicles. The wire stock, for all its complaints, collapses flat against the receiver. The contempt begins to fade. In the Pacific theater, the advantages multiply. The Thompson's complex action jams constantly in the humid jungle environment. The constant cleaning required to keep it functioning becomes exhausting. But the M3's ejection port cover keeps debris out of the mechanism. Its simpler action tolerates conditions that would disable its predecessor. One soldier later described his experience. "I hated that gun when they gave it to me. It wasn't as sharp-looking as my Thompson and looked like a leftover from the parts locker. But when I needed it, that gun never let me down. I didn't clean it in combat. I just loaded it and dragged it through the mud. And it kept shooting." The soldiers who mocked the grease gun in training learned to trust it in combat. Private D. Eberhardt of the 42nd Infantry Division trained on the grease gun at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. He and his fellow soldiers held it in mild contempt, he later admitted, considering it a cheap knockoff of the German MP-40. Then he took it to war. January 8, 1945. Rimling, France. Technical Sergeant Charles F. Carey of the 397th Infantry Regiment, 100th Infantry Division, faces an impossible situation. 200 German infantry, supported by 12 tanks, have overrun his battalion's position. His anti-tank guns are lost. His men are scattered and pinned down. Carey grabs his M3 grease gun and organizes what remains of his platoon. Armed with the $20 submachine gun, he leads a patrol into the German-held sector, rescues 2 of his squads, evacuates the wounded under fire. When enemy soldiers fortify a house blocking American movement, Carey advances under covering fire, approaches the building, and throws a grenade through the door. Then he enters alone. Minutes later, he emerges with 16 prisoners at gunpoint. The intelligence he provides leads to the capture of 41 additional Germans in adjacent houses, but Carey isn't finished. He assembles another patrol, maneuvers to within yards of an enemy tank, and disables it with a rocket. As the crew attempts to escape their burning vehicle, Carey calmly picks them off one by one with his rifle. The next morning, German infantry surround a house where Carey has posted a squad. 4 soldiers escape to the attic, trapped. Carey maneuvers a staircase against the building and rescues them. Later that day, attempting to reach an outpost, Technical Sergeant Carey is struck down by sniper fire. For his actions at Rimling, Charles F. Carey received the Medal of Honor posthumously. The grease gun he carried during those desperate hours at Rimling helped him capture nearly 60 enemy soldiers and save the lives of countless Americans. The $20 weapon in the hands of an extraordinary soldier. Across the European theater, stories multiply. An Army Combat Observations report from February 5, 1945, details what small unit leaders in the 99th Infantry Division think of their submachine guns. The M3 submachine gun is the best weapon we use for patrolling. It can be put into action quickly and at short ranges is accurate and powerful. Tank crews discover the grease gun's value for a different reason. Sherman tanks carry as many as 5 M3s for crew protection. Armorer Russell Spooner observed that an M3 lifted above the hatch opening could spray the countryside with a lot of bullets in a matter of seconds. When tankers need to abandon their vehicle under fire, that suppressive capability means survival. The weapon designed to be disposable is becoming indispensable. The production numbers stagger the imagination. Between 1943 and the end of World War II, Guide Lamp's factory in Anderson, Indiana, produces over 606,000 M3 submachine guns. An additional 15,000 of the improved M3A1 variant roll off the lines before the Japanese surrender. Total wartime production, 622,163 weapons. At $20.94 each, the Army spent roughly $13 million arming its soldiers with grease guns. The equivalent number of Thompsons would have cost over $28 million. The savings bought other weapons, other equipment, other advantages. The speed of development became military legend, from concept on paper to adopted weapon in just 7 months. No other firearm in American military history has ever matched that timeline. When Guide Lamp started production in May 1943, they were building a weapon that hadn't existed a year earlier. The company that made car headlights had created one of the most successful submachine guns in history. But here's what makes the M3 truly remarkable. It refused to become obsolete. After World War II, the Army officially adopted the M3A1 as the standard submachine gun, replacing the Thompson entirely. The improved version eliminated the troublesome cocking handle entirely, replacing it with a simple finger hole in the bolt. Soldiers could cock the weapon by inserting a finger and pulling back. One less part to break. One less thing to go wrong. Korea saw tens of thousands in action. The M3 became the primary submachine gun for United States forces, with South Korean units receiving tens of thousands through military assistance programs. By the time American advisors arrived in Vietnam, the grease gun was 20 years old. It kept serving. Helicopter pilots carried M3A1s in their cramped cockpits because they were smaller than the M16 rifle and offered more firepower than a pistol. When a helicopter went down in hostile territory, that compact submachine gun could mean the difference between capture and rescue. Tank crews kept them aboard their vehicles for close protection. In the jungles of Vietnam, where enemy soldiers could materialize from the vegetation at arm's length, the M3's 30-round magazine and automatic fire provided essential security. Special operations forces used suppressed versions for covert missions. Bell Laboratories had developed a sound-suppressed variant for the Office of Strategic Services during World War II, featuring a specially drilled barrel and expansion sleeve to quiet the report. Only about 1,000 were ever made, but they armed Army Green Berets in Southeast Asia and later equipped Delta Force for counterterrorism operations. Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon, Army long-range reconnaissance patrols all carried grease guns behind enemy lines. The weapon that looked like a plumber's tool had become the choice of America's elite warriors. The weapon designed for a single war fought in 4 of them. When American tank crews rolled into Kuwait during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, many still carried M301 submachine guns in their vehicles. Weapons manufactured in 1944 and 1945, nearly 50 years old, still functioning, still reliable, still ready for combat. Patrick J. Chason, a former tank company commander, reported having 2 M3A1s in his unit arms room as late as 2001. The disposable weapon had outlasted 3 generations of soldiers. Why? The same qualities that made it ugly made it indestructible. Those stamped metal parts didn't require careful maintenance. The loose tolerances that offended precision-minded soldiers meant the action kept working when fouled with sand, mud, or debris. The simple blowback operation had nothing complicated to break. The low rate of fire reduced wear on components. Soldiers in Vietnam reported dragging M3s through mud without cleaning them. The weapons kept shooting. The Thompson, with its tighter tolerances and more complex action, would have jammed. The design philosophy George Hyde embraced in 1942 proved prophetic: simple, robust, reliable. Forget elegance. build something that works. The M3 grease gun represents something larger than military procurement decisions. It represents the recognition that sometimes good enough is better than perfect. The Thompson was a beautiful weapon, finely machined, precisely fitted, a triumph of craftsmanship. And when America needed millions of submachine guns, craftsmanship couldn't keep up. The grease gun was ugly, crude, built by workers who made car headlights. And when soldiers needed a weapon that wouldn't fail in the mud of France or the jungles of the Pacific or the deserts of Kuwait, the grease gun delivered for $20. George Hyde, the German immigrant who designed it, never received the recognition he deserved. His name isn't famous like John Thompson or Samuel Colt or John Garand. He designed the weapon, watched it go to war, and quietly passed away in December 1963 at Adelphi Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. But his philosophy endured. Modern military firearms increasingly embrace stamped steel, polymer frames, and loose tolerances. The M16 rifle that eventually replaced the M3 uses similar production techniques. The aesthetic that soldiers mocked in 1943 became the standard in military small arms. The grease gun was ahead of its time. It proved that in war, what matters isn't how a weapon looks. It's whether the weapon works when a soldier needs it to work. When 200 German infantry and 12 tanks are overrunning your position, when you're dragging yourself through a Vietnamese jungle, when your tank is hit and you need to fight your way out, that's when the $20 America spent on each M3 paid dividends. Not in elegance, not in precision, in lives. That paratrooper from the 82nd Airborne, the one who jumped into darkness over Normandy carrying a weapon that looked like it belonged in a garage, he survived D-Day. He survived the hedgerows, he survived the push into Germany, and when he came home, the Army let him keep his grease gun. For decades, that $20 submachine gun sat in basements and gun safes across America, brought home by the men who had mocked it in training and trusted it in combat, a reminder that appearances deceive. Today, M3 grease guns still turn up in conflict zones around the world. Afghanistan, the Philippines, anywhere a simply constructed, easy-to-maintain submachine gun might still be needed for short-range combat. 60 years after the last one rolled off the production line, George Hyde's disposable weapon keeps working. The submachine gun everyone laughed at, the weapon nobody wanted, the $20 gun that outserved every other submachine gun America ever made. The grease gun earned its name and its reputation. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe. Next week, the fighter plane. The Air Force didn't want that became the most successful close air support aircraft in history. The arsenal of democracy holds more surprises than you ever imagined, and we're just getting started.